Các bà Mỹ thân mến,
Dear American friends,
tôi rất sung sướng
I am so happy as a South Vietnamese woman and mother to have the opportunity to speak to you. I convey to the American women friends my best wishes for good luck and more happiness. May I express my sincere thanks to the Women's Strike for Peace for its contribution to the anti-war movement and its sympathy and support to our people, particularly the South Vietnamese women. Together with us, you certainly share the same anxiety about how to put a rapid end to the war in Vietnam, so that our sons, our husbands, may return home quickly and live a normal life, and that the friendship between the peoples of Vietnam and the United States be built on a fair and equal basis. As for us, South Vietnamese women, our aspirations for peace are all the more ardent, as for over 25 consecutive years now, our compatriots, we women included, have never enjoyed a single day of peace. Let me tell you that in my own family, several members have been killed, while some others are still jailed by the Saigon regime. I myself have had no much time to live with my husband and my children. The moments my son and daughter were allowed to be at my side have become so rare, and therefore so precious to them. American administrations have for over 10 years not ceased explaining to you that the presence of American GIs and weapons in South Vietnam is designed to help the South Vietnamese people resist communist aggression and defend freedom for the South Vietnamese people or ensure the safety of the United States and the free world. But facts have pointed out that all the above allegations are sheer lies. Successive American administrations since 1965 to date have dropped over South Vietnam a stretch of land smaller than Washington State or a little bigger than Florida, an enormous quantity of bombs which equals nearly 10 million tons and corresponds to 700 times the atomic bomb dropped on Hiroshima. The American government has sent to South Vietnam more than 500,000 American troops and those of the so-called allies of the United States in the ratio of 1 soldier of the free world to every 50 South Vietnamese. Those soldiers, your husbands, sons or brothers, have been dispatched to South Vietnam to perpetrate such atrocities as in Song My, My Lai, such mass murders abhorred by human conscience. They have been sent to South Vietnam to protect the Saigon regime, an obviously dictatorial and fascist puppet regime. How many young Americans have been killed, maimed, and become invalid in this war? According to Pentagon official figures, much lower than actual ones, since President Nixon took office, over 10,000 American GIs have been killed and 50,000 others wounded. The U.S. brutal aggression has caused untold suffering, mourning, and humiliation to the South Vietnamese women. Our own sisters and children have been the victim of mass murders, sweep operations, arrests, detention in jails of the tiger cages pattern, and subjected to barbarous tortures and rapes. I'm not going to talk much about the suffering of the Vietnamese, and even if I did it, it was not to blame you, because we do know that you also feel bitter grief at the sight of such scenes. Never have the Vietnamese people nurtured any enmity towards the American people, nor have we done any harm to the security or the legitimate interests of the United States. We only wish to live in independence and freedom on our own soil, to live a peaceful and happy life, just like any people wants to. It is for those most cherished aspirations that the Vietnamese people have for centuries in their history been fighting, as they are fighting now against the U.S. intervention and cruel aggression. The U.S. legal presence in South Vietnam, as well as the survival of the Thieu Kim administration, a clique of U.S. agents utterly bellicose and corrupt, are the origin of the war, as well as all the suffering in our country. They have also caused the losses in lives and property and the discredit upon the United States' reputation. At the Paris Conference on Vietnam, proceeding from the inalienable right of any nation to self-determination and paying due consideration to the American people's legitimate aspirations, in the name of the South Vietnamese people and the Provisional Revolutionary Government of the Republic of South Vietnam, we have put forward the following logical and reasonable solution with a view to putting an end to the war rapidly and restoring peace in Vietnam. If the American government declares it will withdraw all American troops from South Vietnam before a reasonable and adequate time limit, that is before June 30, 1971, then the Liberation Armed Forces will refrain from attacking the American forces in process of withdrawal, and the parties will engage at once in discussions on the safety to be ensured to the other forces that will be pulled out, and also on the release of captured military men, namely American GIs captured in South Vietnam as well as American pilots captured in North Vietnam. We also demand that the American government give up compelling the South Vietnam people to accept the TOK administration, which is bitterly hated and fiercely opposed by the whole of them. The South Vietnam people will set up a provisional coalition government, that is, a government of broad representativity that stands for peace, independence and neutrality. The state government will hold free and democratic general elections in South Vietnam and at the same time ensure that the South Vietnam people enjoy wide democratic liberties and that no acts of terror or reprisal be taken against those who have collaborated with either side in wartime. All the above-mentioned points have been expounded in my statement of September 17 last in Paris. Please think it over. Does such a solution humiliate the United States in any way or compel it to surrender? Instead, it is precisely the way for the United States to put an end in safety and with dignity to the most protracted and unpopular war in the history of the United States. But President Nixon has answered the South Vietnam people by carrying out his Vietnamization policy, which aims actually at continuing the war and prolonging the presence of a considerable number of American troops in South Vietnam, thus preventing the South Vietnam people from exercising the right to self-determination. On October 7 last, campaigning for the coming elections and taking advantage of the American people's desire for peace, Mr. Nixon put forward such things as a ceasefire in place without preconditions, the release of prisoners of war, an international conference, etc. But after looking carefully at the contents of these issues, one can see clearly that they have no realistic basis at all. How could there be a ceasefire when the parties have not yet come to agreement on the key issues of the war? And how can captured military men be released if the war is being carried on? It is obvious that President Nixon's proposals are not intended to put an end to the war, but simply aim at legalizing the U.S. presence in South Vietnam, so that the United States can continue using its agents TOK to kill the South Vietnam people. It is the peace plan we have set forth that constitutes genuinely a basis for the correct settlement of the South Vietnam problem in response to the aspirations for peace of the Vietnamese people, and also in conformity, I'm sure, with the desire for peace of the peoples in the United States and the world. Dear friends, I do believe that you really understand the things I have just presented, because the women are most sensitive. Now, please take the place of the Vietnamese mothers and wives who are faced by the sight of the homeland devastated each day by thousands of tons of bombs, and who undergo themselves unspeakable suffering and hardship, together with their relatives and dear ones. I am sure that you will do just the same as we are doing now. I mean, you will put out together with your husbands, sons and brothers a resolute struggle, whatever sacrifices or privations may happen, in order to wrest back independence and freedom for your own country, at the same time happiness and a brilliant future for your own families and children. Finally, let me tell you my own emotion, my own gratitude, and that of the South Vietnamese women for you, dear American women, who have been struggling and are struggling valiantly against the war the U.S. government is waging in Vietnam. I hope that you will make greater efforts in demanding, together with us and the world's peoples, that the Nixon administration put an end to the war, bring all American boys home before June 30, 1971, and let the South Vietnam people settle themselves their internal affairs.
My sincere thanks to you, dear friends, and my best wishes for happiness to you, families and children.